As I mentioned yesterday, President Biden announced his executive order on reducing gun violence and making our communities safer. But critics of the order say he's really just imposing new burdens on law-abiding gun owners and circumventing Congress in an attempt to involve the federal government in every firearm transaction that takes place. Now, could the Biden administration be inching toward what's called a national gun registry? And if so, how problematic could that be for law-abiding citizens? Joining me now to discuss this is Congressman Greg Murphy, who is a member of the House Ways and Means Committee and a member of the Second Amendment Caucus. He represents the 3rd Congressional District of North Carolina. Congressman Murphy, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Good afternoon, Tony. Hope you're doing well.
Doing well. Good to see you. So, like many things that the Democrats push, President Biden's executive order has a title that sounds like something we could all get behind. But what issues do you have with what he's proposing?
Just specifically when you look at this, Tony, this is what the president wants. He wants everybody who has a gun to be on a registry, every law-abiding citizen to be on a registry where that if, God forbid, something were to happen, they would know who law-abiding citizens had guns. The sad thing is this is an absolute aberration and misunderstanding of who commits crimes with guns. It's not law-abiding people, but that's who he's after. He wants to have all those things in a nice little place so that he can put people out or go to them that they have guns. And so it's just an absolute attack on the Second Amendment. And this administration, you've seen this, Tony, is time and time again becoming weaponized against the law-abiding citizens of the country. And this is just another avenue, absolutely another avenue in which he's trying to do this.
Yeah, I want to talk about who uses guns legally and illegally. But first, what legitimate purpose is there for a national gun registry? Why does the federal government need to know who has a gun? What purpose is there?
Well, Tony, you might be able to tell me because I don't know of one. I don't know that there is something, any need for the country, the members in the the government, to know who owns a gun and who does not own a gun. I'd love for them to know which criminals own guns. That I could probably get behind that. But I say that in jest in some ways, but absolutely law-abiding citizens, that's not the right of the government. We have a right to own a gun for hunting, for self-protection. And the government has no right to intrude upon that privacy.
Well, Congressman, I want to go to that issue of those who use guns, the criminals who use those guns, and I'm sure you're very familiar with all the statistics, but according to the government's own statistics, 90% of those who are in prison for gun-related crimes, they did not obtain their gun legally. I mean, how will these types of laws keep guns out of the hands of criminals?
They won't. They won't, Tony. And this is the difference in the politic and the rationale between what I believe are conservative and liberals. Liberals love to enact laws and enact policies that make you feel well, feel good about yourself, feel good about what's happening. I think conservatives tend to be sometimes dispassionate to our default, but to the point we're actually making rational decisions. We're thinking about the secondary tertiary, quaternary consequences of actions, rather than just what liberals love to do. They like to make policies and laws that make them feel good. They really don't have true essence in their execution. And so I don't think it really does anything.
Well, I just
crime.
One correction on that, Congressman, and I know you know this well. While it may make people feel good, there are unintended consequences that come for these that actually trample upon constitutional freedoms and the rights of law-abiding citizens.
Absolutely. And that's what I was saying. They don't think about the secondary consequences of how this could infringe upon the rights of Americans as guaranteed in our Constitution. So again, this is why they don't, in my opinion, make rational and good reasoned decisions.
So the president, they always use, the backdrop of some, mass shooting to announce some kind of new gun control measure that they're pushing. Let me ask you this question based upon what the president put in place with his executive order. How would that have stopped any of the recent shootings that we've seen in the country?
It wouldn't, Tony. And again, it plays upon people's emotions. It plays upon people's fears. And they, as you know, as our wonderful liberal friend said, never put a crisis to waste. And this is where you play upon the emotions and you make knee-jerk responses and knee-jerk policies to something that really, in effect, doesn't really get to the root cause of the issue. And that's what they're doing in this particular circumstance.
So, Dr. Murphy, you and your colleagues, you've seen this coming. You've recently reintroduced, along with Michael Cloud, a bill to prevent the federal government from building this federal firearms registry. I mean, there's, I think, close to like 1 billion records they have of gun ownership. Uh, right now, this does not have to be transmitted to the federal government, but now they're requiring them to keep these, apparently through this executive order, keep these, well, I think it was through the previous legislation, keep these records indefinitely. So what would your legislation do that addresses this or preempts a federal firearms registry?
Well, Tony, we want to stop what they're trying to do. We're saying that it's not legal to produce a universal registry. Going back to the fundamental problem, the government does not have that right to invade our privacy that we have, that we protect our Second Amendment rights. And so what we're trying to do legislatively is to reinforce the fact that the government does not have that right. Now, as we can see, Biden right now is President Biden is trying to trample upon that right. And so we're trying to legislatively try to block that and say, no, that cannot be done.
Now, speaking of the Second Amendment, Congressman Murphy, you've introduced a bill in Congress that would protect the constitutional Second Amendment rights of military families. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, so I live in a very military heavy district. We have Camp Lejeune, New River Air Station, Cherry Point, and I actually have 1 out of 7 of my constituents as veterans. This is a very military heavy district. And so now when a member of the military moves with his or her spouse, they are afforded to be able to purchase a gun, but that spouse is not afforded the able to do that, unlike in carryover from other states. So we're basically saying if they had a right to do that before, they had access to have a gun before, that ability should follow them, should be able to go into wherever they're in their new station. So we're just trying to introduce the fact that they were law-abiding citizens, maybe at another station, and when they get moved to a new base or something, they should carry with them that same right to have an arm, to carry an arm.
It makes perfect sense to me. I mean, these are the men and women whose families are defending us. They ought to be able to defend themselves if necessary.
Absolutely.
Now, a part of the executive order, back to the executive order the president issued, it requires the Department of Defense to develop and implement principles to further firearm and public safety practices through DoD acquisition of firearms. And I want to make sure I'm not reading too much into that, but can you explain what that does?
I'm not quite sure, Tony. I think what they're trying to do is say, well, you see the existing law that's on the books. We really want to weaponize it. We really want to push it further. And therefore, say, for example, you had a gun you wanted to sell to a cousin or something. All of a sudden, they're going to push and say, you're an arms dealer. You're someone else that should be sanctioned, should be registered, and all these other things. It just continues to push the envelope where I think our liberal friends would love to no longer allow each of us to have guns. But that said, it's a further weaponization of this administration to try to take our Second Amendment rights. And I don't think this stands up constitutional muster, as with many of his executive orders.
Yeah, we're up against a break, but that was going to be my next question. Can this executive order, and do you think this executive order, I should say, will be challenged in court?
Absolutely, and I don't think it will go I think it will be absolutely blocked.
Okay. All right, Dr. Murphy, I think you're going to stick around with us because I want to talk with you about the president's speech today regarding prescription drug prices, and also, once again, taking a shot at Republicans saying they want to defund Social Security, cut funding for Social Security. I mean, I've heard that almost every day from the Biden administration, despite the fact that Republicans have repeatedly said, we're not cutting Social Security. We're not cutting any of those benefits like that. I watched the president's speech in Las Vegas, and frankly, it seemed to be just a part of his giveaway tour, just talking about more good things that he can give away to people at taxpayer expense. But I want to get your thoughts on the president's remarks today.
Tony, I try to be charitable as best as I can, but as we were speaking to a few minutes ago, this is the liberal idea that we make people feel good and we love to throw out gifts and there are no consequences. There are absolute consequences. We saw them if you want to explore the Silicon Valley Bank going bankrupt or going under. We look at the rates that the Federal Reserve has had to put out to try to stem inflation. All a direct result of the reckless spending that we had over the last 2 years under his direction. And so, yes, he loves to go out and say, we're going to give away, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And it makes people feel better. But but we actually have to have adults in the room that understand that these policies have led us in a very, very dark place. He just simply doesn't understand it. He's been in Washington for 50 years. And he's just absolutely, he and his administration, for that matter, are absolutely out of touch with the American people and the American condition.
Well, it's as if the government is the solution to every problem. And of course, that's what has led us to the point of $32 trillion in debt. It's just kicking the can down the road and becomes more expensive with every kick. I want to you to address this because the president made this comment again today, and I talked about it before the break. He said, he went back to a State of the Union address suggesting that Republicans want to cut Social Security, but he even has members of his administration out doing the same thing. Over the weekend, sure. He had the director of the Office of Management and Budget, Shalanda Young, out there saying the same thing. I want to play this clip and get you to respond to it. Clip 11, please.
Let me be clear. The top existential threat to Social Security is those in this town that want to cut it. I wish we were in the part of the debate where we could talk about extending. This president chose to focus on protecting benefits, and that's what this budget does.
Congressman Murphy, can you tell me who is proposing a cut to Social Security?
No one. And the Republicans have made that very clear. And let me be very, I try to be charitable, Tony, but this president is the most deceitful president that we've ever had in this country. He is absolutely lying to the American people. Yes, we do have a responsibility to make sure Social Security is solvent. It is there for all the Americans that have put into it, but he is absolutely lying to the American people. And he continues this trail of lies. And for the administration, other officials to get in on the lying trail, it goes back to a very famous political propagandist who I will not mention because of the nature of his comments, is that if you tell a lie as many times, if you continue to tell a lie, people will start to believe it. So that's what he's doing. He's absolutely continuing on that. And it is just a tragedy. You can't have somebody in the member of politics get up and tell the people the truth. And that's what he's not doing.
Congressman, I agree with you 100% because I have asked every member of Republican leadership that has come on this program about whether or not they're going to cut Social Security, and everyone has said that's not even on the table. We have said clearly we're not going to cut Medicare, we're not going to cut Social Security. We're looking at the discretionary spending is where they are looking. And I think this is what upsets people so much when we look at politics, is that when there is outright deception and you cannot believe what your leaders are telling you because they're, as you said, they're lying, that just undermines the trust in our government. And I think when you see what's happened in the last few...
Tony, even to another point, I consider this truly elder abuse. Let's just be very clear about it. It is lying. It's no different than commercials on TV or spam callers that take advantage of people's credit card numbers and get millions of dollars out of their account or whatever they have in their accounts. This is a lie, and so it's abusing our senior population by lying to them. And to be in truthful honest, he should be ashamed. He should absolutely be ashamed of what he's doing, and as well as his administration. It is shameful to lie to our senior citizens like this.
But this is the fear mongering that we've seen in the last few years with government, scaring people, because when people are scared, you can lead them pretty much anywhere you want them to go. We saw this through COVID. You're a doctor. We've talked about this. You've seen this. I mean, is this what we have to expect now from government?
Well, I think that's what we've learned to expect from this particular president. I don't know that we have to expect it from government, nor should we expect it from government. But this president, excuse me, is in his inaugural address came out and said he was going to be the unity president. Then he went to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and began the most divisive presidency, in my opinion, in this nation's history. Racial relations are worse now than they've ever been. And so I'm trying to be a good Christian about this, Tony, but he's lying through his teeth. And it is a very, very sad fact. And he's playing upon the emotions and fears of our senior population and our population as a whole.
Well, Congressman, I think we're right to speak truth as charitably as we can, but we have to speak truth because there's really two visions, if you will, of where America can go. We can live in a world of fear-mongering and of being frightened at every turn, or we can cast a vision of what we can become if we take responsibility.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Congressman, always great to see you. Thanks so much for being generous with your time today, and appreciate you being on Washington Watch.
Thank you so much, Tony. God bless.